So in this video, we'll be going over the tech stack that I'll be using to create my web app. We'll also be going over my thought process as to why I'm picking these technologies and reading up on these tools and services so then that I can have a better understanding of what they're capable of. And I'll also be going over some alternative frameworks and solutions that you can use for your own web app as well. So when you're picking out the tech stack that you want to use for your project, you want to refer to the PRD to have an understanding of the things that you need to build out. You want to pick the right tools and solutions to do the job. In a previous video, we went over what a PRD is and created the PRD for our own web app. And we want a web app that allows users to upload an image or a video, and then you can perform a visual computing technique on it, and then you can see the results of it and be able to download it. So by reading the PRD and the requirements, we want to pick technologies and solutions that'll help us build out a website. So then the first technology that you want to figure out for your web app is the front-end framework that you'll be using. And I'll be using Next.js. So Next.js is a React framework that lets you do server-side rendering and React server components. And the reason that I'm picking Next.js is because I have industry experience from my previous job using React. So this is something that I'm very, very comfortable with. But with the work that I did at my job, I only did single page applications. And I didn't have a lot of experience doing server-side rendering and all that stuff. So by picking Next.js, I'm picking something that I'm comfortable with React. And then I'm learning a new skill with server-side rendering and all that stuff. So that is my reasoning for picking Next.js. And because I picked React, I know that the project that I do and the skills that I learned from this project will be transferable if I move to another job, because React is used widely across the industry. So by learning React, you will have a safe bet in terms of the job opportunities that you can get. Now, obviously, you want to pick something that you're comfortable with. And usually whenever people ask me what front-end framework that they should use for their own projects, I usually recommend them React because there's a lot of support for it. But just choose whatever you're comfortable with and something that you've learned. Don't get too tied down on which framework that you should use. Just use whatever you're comfortable with. And if you have no idea and have no experience with it, I just recommend React. React is just one option out there for a front-end framework. There are other solutions out there like Angular, Vue, and Svelte that you can use. Angular, I believe, was created by Google. React was created by Facebook or Meta. And then there's also Vue.js as well and Svelte as well. I don't know much about the differences between all three of them, but I just know that these are popular frameworks that are used across the industry. The component library that I'll be using for this website is shadcn. If you're not aware of what a component library is essentially a library of commonly used UI components on our website. One of the reasons that you want to use a component library is, let's say, for example, that you need a calendar in your web app. Instead of building out a calendar by yourself, you can just import shadcn's or a component library's calendar component into your web app. Component libraries implements a lot of the commonly used UI components on a website. So all you have to do is import the component into your web app, and then you can apply your own business logic for your own web app. And one of the reasons that I'm using shadcn specifically is it's one of the more modern component libraries that has been released recently. The people who created Next.js has also created shadcn. So there's a lot of developer ecosystem overlap between these two services. So I kind of want to see what the hype is about between this. And I've also heard a lot of good things about the developer experience of using shadcn. And one of the reasons that I wanted to use shadcn as well was with a tool called V0. So V0 was created by the same people who created Vercel, Next.js, and shadcn. And what it is, from what I've seen, is that it's a AI chatbot that uses shadcn to create web pages for you. So you just type in what you want, and it'll give you the HTML using shadcn components of the specific web page that you want. So let me give it an example real quick. In this example, I want V0 to give me a page to visualize someone's song streams of the past day, month, and year. And I also want another tab so that I can view the royalties. And they should plot it on an XY graph. So with V0, by giving it this prompt, it should hopefully give me back a page with the HTML and React code using shadcn as the component library. So after some time, this is what V0 gave me back. I have a graph of a user's sales throughout the past month, day, and year. So I got that down. And then I can also do streams or royalties. So as you can see here, we can use V0 to help us build out our front end utilizing shadcn components. So that's why I want to use shadcn so that I can use a tool like V0 to help me out. I'm going to be using Vercel to deploy my Next.js application. So Vercel is a platform as a service. And what they do is they deploy your Next.js application onto the internet. So whenever a user goes onto your website, they're going to need the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in order to be able to interact with it. Vercel handles deploying all of that onto the internet, onto CDNs and edge networks. So all you have to worry about is building out your website, and Vercel handles the deployment process for you. Vercel is very powerful because if you don't know how to deploy websites, Vercel does it for you. So it helps you get up and running very quickly. And Vercel does have a hobby and a free tier, and because we're just starting out, we're not going to see any performance or bottlenecks just yet. So the free tier should be good enough. And if we need more support and more scaling, you could upgrade to the pro, or you can learn how to deploy your Next.js application yourself. Vercel created Next.js, shadcn, and v0. So there's going to be a lot of tight integrations between all these services. And that usually leads to a better developer experience. And my hopes is because there's a better developer experience, is going to make my life a lot easier and I can develop faster. So now that we picked out a tech stack for our front end, we now want to pick a cloud compute provider for our web app. And we're going to be using AWS for this. The reason you want to use something like AWS is because they help manage and scale a lot of the cloud computing services that you may need. So instead of having to manage and deploy your own hardware and your own infrastructure, AWS handles that for you. So all you have to worry about is developing the web app, and AWS will handle the maintenance, the scaling of all the cloud computing services that you need. So in our case, we're going to be using AWS S3 to store the user images and videos, and then we're going to be using Lambda to perform visual computing concepts on those images. And then when we need a database, we're going to be using AWS RDS to deploy a Postgres instance for ourselves. Now, AWS isn't the only cloud provider out there. There are other options like Microsoft Azure and Google Cloud Compute. But if you wanted my opinion on what you should use and what you should learn, I typically recommend people to use AWS, mainly because AWS is the market leader when it comes to cloud computing providers. And because of that, there's going to be a lot more resources out there for you to learn and to study from. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you use AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud Compute. What does matter is if you know cloud computing concepts in general. Each of these cloud providers have their own solution when it comes to something like S3, for example. So as long as you know cloud computing concepts, you can apply those skills and those knowledge onto any of these platforms. Now let's talk about the database and the backend framework that we'll use for this project. For the MVP for this web app, I don't think we need a database or a backend server just yet, but when we build out features that require one, I'll most likely use Postgres as the database. The reason I'm picking Postgres is mainly because that's what I have the most experience in. At my previous job, we had a Postgres instance for our database, and that's just what I'm most comfortable in. And likewise, the backend framework that I'll be using is Spring, which is a Java framework. Again, at my old job, this is what we use for our backend framework. So this is just something that I'm the most comfortable using. But I did want to take this project as an opportunity to learn a new framework. And the options that I'm considering are Nest.js, Django, and Supabase. The reason for Nest is that it's in TypeScript, and because it's in TypeScript, I can have my front end and my back end both be in the same language, which will be easier for me since I don't have the context switch between two different languages. The reason for Django is a Python framework, and when I'm building out my lambdas to perform visual computing techniques on images and videos, I'm going to be building out my lambda code in Python as well. So because of this, all my backend, the backend framework and the serverless stuff can both be in Python. And then the third option that I'm considering is Supabase. Supabase is a backend as a service, and what it does is it deploys a Postgres instance for you, and it makes it very easy to get up and running for a backend. So I'm kind of leaning towards Spring, but I think Supabase is a close second in terms of what I want to use. So that's what I'll be using for the backend. And then for my infrastructure as code, I'll probably be using Terraform for this. So whenever I need to use AWS to create like an S3 or Lambda or an RDS, I can write Terraform code to deploy that for me onto AWS. There are other solutions out there like AWS CDK. Pulumi is also a recent one as well. I'd used CDK at work before, so I'll probably want to just pick Terraform just to learn it. With Terraform, it'll be cloud platform agnostic. While if I'm using CDK, I'm kind of stuck with AWS. So that's the reason I'm picking Terraform, is because it's cloud agnostic and I want to learn something new. And that'll be the tech stack that I'll be using for this web app. In the next video, I'll be going over the system design for this web app, where I'll be connecting all these technologies together to come up with a solution on how to build out the web app. So hope you learned something new. Take care and goodbye.